Hey, and welcome to the highlights of episode number 215 with Amy McCready. Some of my favorite parts of this episode were when she talks about how to create capable and grateful children in an over-entitled world. I also love her tips like the when-then practice and the time for training and the no rescue policy. And I also loved it when she talks about how to invite your children into the decision-making process so that their core desires of respect are being met, which is so important. But there is so much more wisdom and inspiration that you get in the full episode. So to listen to the full podcast and get all the info in the show notes, head on over to melissaambrosini.com/215 right now. Amy, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here. Can you tell us your story and how you got to where you are today doing this work? Like, how did this all unfold for you?
Well, my professional experience was in corporate America, working for big companies, and that's just always what I did. And then when I had children, I was a working mom and traveling and raising children. And I found raising children so much more difficult than my professional life. And what I found is that with my sort of controlling and driving tendencies, what was happening is I was getting just big time power struggles from my kids. And they were just wonderful little kids, but it was me. And so I started studying parenting. I started taking classes and I loved it. It was just life changing because when I started using these strategies with my kids, their behavior was better and I felt better about myself and I wasn't yelling anymore. And it just turned our whole family around. And so I spent probably the next 5 years studying and creating my own curriculum because a lot of my business background was in training. And I created a curriculum and started teaching it to parents, and they loved it. And it has been my life's work ever since. So I never thought I would be a parenting educator, but this is what I've been doing, and I can't imagine doing anything else.
How do we raise these capable and grateful kids in this over-entitled world? Where do we start? How do we do it?
One of the most important things is to start with this question, are kids more entitled today? Or, why are they more entitled today? And there are really some societal changes that have happened in the past 2 generations. One of the biggest ones is that we don't actually need for our kids to contribute to the family like we did a couple of generations ago when we lived on family farms and everybody had family businesses. Back then, everybody had to contribute or the family didn't eat. The family could not function without everybody contributing. So now kids don't have that sense of what it feels like to contribute to the greater good. But I think the biggest piece of entitlement and the thing that we can really focus on in this conversation and your listeners can really take action on right away is what I call the overs, kind of the over parenting. So that would be overindulging our kids, overpraising, overdoing for them, doing things for them that they're perfectly capable of doing for themselves. And so it's just kind of some bad habits that we fall into that give our kids this attitude of entitlement. But the good news is that parents can turn this around with some, pretty simple tools that they can start putting into place.
What can we do to turn that around so that we can raise these really capable and grateful children?
Well, the first thing that we want to do is to give them what they are truly entitled to, and that is our time. And you talked about mind, body, and soul time, which is spending one-on-one time when it's one parent, one child, when you are fully present in mind, body, and soul and doing what the child wants to do. And that only has to be for 10 or 15 minutes once or twice a day. When you start giving them that undivided attention every single day, and like you said with Leo, you call it something special, that changes so much because what we're doing is we're meeting our kids' hardwired emotional needs for emotional connection and attention. Essentially, we're filling their attention bucket. And we have to do that. Kids absolutely have to have our attention. If we don't give it to them proactively and positively by spending that one-on-one time, they're going to get our attention, but it's going to be with those really annoying, frustrating, maddening, entitled behaviors.
What are some other things that we can do to really raise these beautiful, capable, and grateful children?
Our kids are so much more capable than we give them credit for. And they can and should make meaningful contributions to the family. I'm talking from like the time they're 18 months old. They can do really important jobs like you carry them into the room and they put the light switch up and down. Or little toddlers can separate socks. A little toddler can have a plastic knife and cut up cucumbers on a cutting board while you're making salad. They can tear lettuce, of course, all the way up to teenagers. So it's really important to get them started early on contributing and giving them lots of encouragement when they do that. So we want to get them started early contributing. But if you haven't and you expect that it might be a little bit of a battle, you'll want to use a really important tool called when then, or the when then routine. And essentially, the way that works is after school, for instance, when you've finished your homework and done your family job, then you can enjoy your technology time. So a when then routine always structures the yucky stuff to happen before the fun stuff. And that's a great way to get those family contributions done without a lot of fussing from the kids. Because if they want to get to the technology, well, then they will get their family contribution done before that. And one other little note, do you use the word chores, Melissa, in Australia? Would that be the word that parents typically use?
Either chores or jobs, but we say tasks.
Ah, okay. That's great. In the US, they use the word chores a lot, which sort of denotes drudgery, like, oh, nobody wants to do a
Mm-hmm.
chore. So I like to call them family contributions because it just sends that message that when you do X, even though we know you probably don't enjoy it, you make a difference for our family. And that's just a really incredible sense of belonging, like we're working together as a team for the greater good. And it gives the child a huge sense of significance and power.
Another one that I loved was the time for training. So, can you explain to us what time for training is?
Yes. So, as I mentioned, toddlers through teens should contribute on a daily basis. And another reason that's important is because they have to learn skills so they can eventually move out of your house. So really like every every couple of weeks, every month, whenever it is, we should always be training our kids on some new skill. And some of it might be self-care activities, brushing their own teeth rather than you brushing for them, or tying shoes, ironing a shirt, or it could be contributions around the house. So it could be teaching them how to do a load of laundry, start to finish, from sorting to folding to putting away. Or it could be making things in the kitchen. So it doesn't have to be like difficult, terrible tasks, but it's just learning new skills all the time. So they're becoming more self sufficient in their own care, and they're learning new skills that they're contributing more to the family. And think about your child whenever they finish high school or their highest level of education and they move out of your house, they should be proficient in basically every skill that's required to run a home.
What else? What else can we do to create capable and grateful children?
Well, I would love to just piggyback on your comment about teaching them buying and selling and how to use a bank account and all of that, because that's one of the big, again, kind of one of those big bucket areas for raising unentitled kids. And that is to really move them from a place of complete dependence on us to complete independence when it comes to finances. So at a very young age, like, 3.5 or 4, you can start giving your kids pocket money or an allowance. And so anytime you go to the store and they say, oh, I want that, can I get that? You can say, oh, did you bring your pocket money? Or did you bring your wallet? And very early on, you get them into the habit of mom or dad don't buy things just because you want them when we go to the store. We save up for those. And then as kids get older and they're continuing to get an allowance or pocket money, the important piece of that is to make sure that you're giving them more expenses that they're responsible for. So if they buy lunch at school, you might give them a larger sum, but now they're responsible for budgeting that money to make sure they have enough money to get through the week or get through the month. And so those are ways that kids can really develop skills around finance and budgeting and saving and investing. So you can feel confident that when they are going off to university or whatever their next step is, that they are financially responsible. The other area that I think we really have to focus on when we're talking about unentitling our kids and helping them be capable, grateful, and independent is another tool that I call the no rescue policy. And one of the things that we parents, because I did this myself too at times, we tend to rescue our kids. They forget their homework or their assignments and we drive it to school. Or if they forget their lunch, we drive it to school. We drive the soccer bag because they have forgotten and haven't taken responsibility. And if that happens once in a great while, no big deal. We help each other out. We're a family. But if this is happening kind of every week or happening pretty frequently that the parent is getting annoyed by it, then we know that it's time to implement the no rescue policy. And the no rescue policy would be a conversation that says, you are growing up in so many ways and you're really ready to start taking responsibility for remembering X, whatever that is, the homework, the lunchbox, the sporting equipment, whatever that happens to be. You are ready to take complete responsibility for that. So from now on, I'm not going to be reminding you about remembering your sports bag. But then you kind of have to go through, since I'm not going to be reminding you, what do you need to do so that you can remember? And so basically you want to set the child up for success. Maybe he needs to make a list that he sees before he walks out the door. And then you kind of let that play out. And then the next time that you see that bag sitting in the hallway after he's left for school, you just freeze and you don't get in your car and you don't drive it there. Because if we keep stepping in and rescuing our kids, taking responsibility for things that they should be responsible for, we're really undermining their long-term sense of independence. But let's talk about another one of my favorite tools. And this we can start using when kids are pretty young, certainly all the way up into the teens. And let me set up the scenario. The child wants to do something that you haven't been comfortable letting him do before. He hasn't been allowed to do before. And they ask you to do that. And your first response would probably be, no, you know the rules for that. We don't allow you to drive your bicycle over there unsupervised. So the tool that I love to use in this situation is called Convince Me. With Convince Me, your child is basically going to convince you that this is a good idea. And so what you would do is share your concerns. These are my concerns about you driving across town on your bike, whatever it happens to be. And then it is your child's job to go back and take those concerns and really thoughtfully consider them and then create his plan for how he would address those concerns. And then basically he's going to come back and convince you on why that's a good idea. And so when he comes back with whatever he wants to convince you with, if you are convinced and you have a sense that he's thought this through and he has a plan in place and he has a backup plan, if that falls through, then you can say, you know what, you've really put a lot of thought into this and I feel comfortable with your plan. I'm going to say yes. But I love this tool because it is sort of a shared decision. And it's not just the parent deciding yes or no and holding all the cards. The child has some power in this and he's taking responsibility for his own success.
And you talk a lot about respect in the book and the basic needs of children. Can you talk a little bit about respect and their basic needs?
Children are just like adults. We all want to be treated with respect. And unfortunately, we parents, and I totally put myself into this category because I told you before, I'm kind of a very type A driver personality. We tend to do a lot of talking to kids. We do a lot of ordering, correcting, and directing them, kind of telling them what to do, when to do, and how to do it. And sometimes we yell at them, but then we get we get upset when they yell at their brother. And so very often we have a double standard. Certain behaviors we're allowed to do, but they're not. And so it's really important that in our communication that we communicate with kids just like we would communicate with a coworker or a friend or hopefully our spouse or partner. The other thing that we can do is, again, instead of telling kids what to do all the time, instead you say, what is your plan for? What is your plan for tidying up the room? That is so empowering and so respectful because, number one, it assumes that they absolutely have a plan in place. And even if they didn't, it gives them a chance to save face and they can say, oh, yeah, I was planning on doing that as soon as I finish the show. Another tool that you can use to show respect is to invite cooperation. Very often, we parents demand cooperation. I need you to do this now. When we invite cooperation rather than demanding it, it changes the energy. Kids are so much more willing and happy to help out because they know it's making a difference. They were invited to do this. Now, we're not going to invite their cooperation all the time. Sometimes they just have to do things because they have to do it. But if we balance that with more respectful communication and inviting them into the process, then that makes a big difference. Another way that we show respect for our kids is by creating what I call a decision-rich environment. And that means finding all sorts of opportunities to bring kids into the decision-making process. They're not going to have a say in every single thing, but the more that we can do that, not only does it foster their decision-making skills, but it shows respect for the child by conveying that I really value what you think and your input is really important in this family.
For those parents who repeatedly have to ask their children to do something, what can we do in that case?
For them, more than anybody, it's so important to do the very basic things that we talked about at the beginning. So the mind, body, and soul time. If they do that one thing, they will get so much better cooperation. But remember, we also talked about the when-then routine. You put it in a when-then format. It's not a battle, but it's simply a matter of if you want to enjoy X privilege, then do the yucky stuff first. So by employing a lot of those respect strategies that I mentioned, and especially mind, body, and soul time, combined with the when then routines, they're going to get a lot of cooperation.
We also, really don't believe in rewarding with ice cream or rewarding with money each to their own, but that's not how we have chosen to parent. And so the way that we kind of incentivize with him is having this desirable activity, which you talk about in the book. And that for him is quality time. So that's the mind, body, and soul time. Putting this little desirable activity at the end of those things just made such a difference for him. But one thing I wanted to ask you is, how can we make this really fun? How can we make it fun for the kids?
I would love for parents to take one or two of the tools that we've talked about in this show and just implement that. And let's make mind, body, and soul the first one you do. And that's going to be fun for your kids, believe me. And it's going to be fun for you because you're going to feel great about yourself as a parent. And then pick one of the other ones that I talk about. Probably when then routines would be a great one to start with. But so much of it is in your attitude and your tone of voice. And the other way that you can make this super fun is by incorporating a lot of these tools like take time for training into a weekly family meeting. A family meeting is so powerful and fun because the whole family's getting together. You can do some fun little training. If you have several children, you can have the older ones training the younger ones so that they're getting experience with that. And so you bring them into the process. The more that you can bring them into all of these things that we're implementing, they're going to get a sense of significance from it, a sense of positive power. And it's just going to go so much more smoothly, which is going to make it more fun for everybody.
Now, I'd love to hear a bit more about you and how you set yourself up for your day.
I always try to be mindful of, before I ever reach for my phone, just want to make sure I pray, I'm thankful, and I just sort of prioritize in my mind what is most important. My kids are mostly out of the house now. So connecting with my husband is kind of the first priority of my day. And then just sort of planning, okay, what do I want to accomplish today? If I only got 3 things done, what would they be? But just trying to be mindful of my day and taking care of the people that I'm responsible for and care about, and which includes, of course, my parent community that I serve every day. Like that's why I wake up and do what I do, because I want to serve those folks. So those are just sort of the things that I kind of start out with. And I don't always do them perfectly, that's for sure, but that's my intent.